Hey, everybody, it's Devin and James here. We're here before we enter the Den of Sin to say a little bit about the Anchor app and Anchor FM, where we record our podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place.
Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer.
And if you're like James and myself living so far apart, we record ours and we're able to upload onto Anchor FM with no problems at all. And by hosting on Anchor, they distribute our podcast to all of the listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and so many more. It's a huge list.
It's everything you need to make a podcast in literally one place.
And you know what the best part of all is, James?
Is it because the Anchor is totally free?
It's because Anchor is totally free.
That's always the best part. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
All right, and on to the den. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Den of Sin with Devin and James. This is Devin Lucas, and I'm here with my co-host James, ready for another movie podcast. How you doing, James?
I'm doing good. Enjoying the colder weather here in Texas, although it's supposed to bounce back up to the high 70s, low 80s. For context, it was in the 40s today, so it's a huge spike up in a day and a half. So,
Yeah,
but no, I mean,
pretty big.
yeah, it's when everybody's here gets sick, and
When it swings that big, that's when the colds start.
yeah, exactly. So, that's not fun, but everything else is cool. How about you, Devin?
I'm doing all right. Not a whole lot to report. I guess I probably did blow a little bit too much of my bank account on Black Friday, but outside of that, I'm doing okay. So yeah, I've got a bruised ass where my wallet goes, but
I feel that. Incredibly, yes.
And then, of course, we found out, thanks to our friend Casey today, that the Martin 4K goes on sale finally.
Tomorrow. It's tomorrow when we're recording this.
Yeah, exactly. I feel safe in saying that it's on pre-order to anybody that listens to this, because it'll be a couple of days, and if it's going to sell out, I'll already have had my chance.
Yeah. I'm very excited. I mean, after the long wait for it and stuff, there hasn't been a movie I've really been looking forward to the release of, especially stuff that even if it has been released, there was a boutique release of the movie, like there's been some stuff in print, but this is a long time coming. So, and it sounds like an incredible release. So I'm poor at the moment, as of you said, Black Friday and all of the sales that come with it. But I'm gonna have to max out a card even if I have to get that pre-order. So very excited.
Yeah, definitely got to get it for people that have been following along with us throughout the entire run of the show. You've probably heard us mention Martin a few times. It's my favorite George Romero movie, which is saying something because I love most George Romero movies. But the other bit of news that I guess it's been out for a couple of days now, but I guess at a convention recently, George Romero's widow did confirm that we will get the director's cut eventually. And the reason why it's not on this 4K is partially because this 4K has taken like 2 or 3 years to put together. It's why we're so excited about it. We found out about it so long ago, and they ran into problems with mastering, or they remastered it again or something because they decided to put it on 4K instead of Blu-ray. And then they stalled it again to see if they could get the long-lost director's cut that recently resurfaced. And it sounds less like it's a money thing, which is what I thought it was at first with the rights holders. It sounds more like, it's a money thing in the other direction. It's a 16 millimeter black and white print of a 45-year-old movie. So it's going to take some money and some time to get this thing looking good. But the good news is Romero's widow has said we will get that version of the movie. So that's one of those holy grails. That's right up there with like the lost Orson Welles Amberson's cut and the ending of the original ending of The Shining for me. Like that's the trifecta, and possibly Martin at the top for me. As much as I would love to see the ending of The Shining, it's probably 2 minutes worth of something very unspectacular that Kubrick cut for a
Exactly.
reason. And Ambersons is not my favorite Orson Welles anyways, so it would be more of a curiosity. But Martin, I'm just thirsty for.
Yeah, absolutely. I still remember your childhood bedroom, if I'm not mistaken, had a big ass Martin poster on the wall. And
Yep.
yeah,
It said there is no magic.
yeah, exactly. That's great. That's still burned in my memory. But yeah, very excited about that. Very excited because it is the holidays. We're getting into the holiday season. My family is going to put up our Christmas tree soon, which I think as a parent, as you and I both are, Christmas has a new meaning, or has in the last decade is reinvigorated my love of Christmas because I get to see it through my son's eyes and get to experience his joy and wonder. With that said, we're going to talk about a couple of movies tonight that maybe not the most traditional Christmas movies. Definitely not Miracle on 34th Street and It's a Wonderful Life, but they're two of my favorite Christmas movies, and I think they happen to be two of yours as well.
Absolutely. Do you want to tell the folks what they are?
Sure. So we for our double feature tonight, we decided to keep it in the holiday season, and we went with Scrooged, 1986.
88.
88. I saw it in the theater. I remember the day, couldn't remember the year. Very memorable experience seeing that in the theater. And I feel like a very modern favorite, Bad Santa, directed by one of my favorite directors who doesn't have a huge filmography, but I've enjoyed everything he's done, Terry Zwigoff. So I know we bandied this about and kind of came up with this idea, and I suggested these purely because, we could talk about a lot of holiday movies, but I think we like on this podcast to not that Bad Santa. In fact, I mean the sequel to Bad Santa, which I don't even think I've ever seen. Have I seen the sequel? I don't think I have.
I was going to ask if you had. I have not seen the sequel. I
remember not hearing good things.
Yeah, I remember being hopeful and then kind of basing it off the reviews after that, and just never got around to it. And if we'd given ourselves a little bit more time on this, I probably would have got around to it. But yeah, I don't think anyone's going to miss it.
Yeah, exactly. I think not that you or I are above, being critical of the film. We neither of us are above criticism and raking a film over the coals as it might deserve, and we've done that on this podcast. I think you and I are also much more inclined to talk about movies we love. To me, I know some people enjoy tearing things apart, not just film, but art in general or culture in general, whatever. If the internet has proven anything, it's that people love to hate on things. I spent my 20s and early 30s being a shameless contrarian. I'll admit, like I like to be the play devil's advocate here and there, but I think that's innate in me. But as I've gotten older, I feel like there's enough hate in the world, so we like to celebrate. And these are two movies that we generally both really enjoy.
So does this mean now you're ready to turn around your opinion on Boondock Saints?
Never. No, that movie can still.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm with you on that.
No, yeah. Like I said, if it's shit, it's shit. I will happily shit on a movie. In fact, I was going to make a post, before we get into it real quick. I know for film lovers, and, you and I obviously, I feel like are in that category. It's kind of innate, I think, for a film lover to do the best films of the year kind of thing at this time of year. They really go through the films they saw this year and talk about their favorites. And it struck me that for like the third or fourth year in a row, I didn't enjoy most of the big films I saw. Like I legitimately was lukewarm to, kind of hostile towards big movies, like movies that people genuinely enjoyed, and not out of, sometimes that can be a result of overhype or whatever. But I think I just genuinely just didn't understand the appeal and, didn't appreciate them, I guess, as much. And I don't, I don't say that to, rain on anybody's parade or to yuck someone else's yum, but it's just like, I was like, I'm like, am I still really hypercritical? Am I still sort of a hater, as they say? Am I still I don't know, I just felt like maybe movie, I just didn't see as many, I didn't enjoy as many of the big movies as much as I might have years ago. And so it's just kind of like, I don't know, it's a weird, once again, at this time of year, I used to love to like put together my list of my favorite movies, my top 10. And most of the best stuff I saw this year was either television or like in that realm, things like Cabinet of Curiosities and stuff like that, which weren't film, or some of my favorite things I saw this year were things I'd never seen, but were probably 3 or 4 or much older films that I sort of discovered for the first time. So I know you and I have talked that you are also not a bit you don't see as much new films as you and I both just spend our lives in movie theaters.
Yeah, I used to watch a lot more new stuff, and I think that goes with age, but I think that also goes with the way that the industry has been turning lately. And I personally have a lot of superhero fatigue and Star Wars fatigue, and I try not to be hypercritical because I am fans of those things. I still consider myself a fan of superhero movies, but at a certain point, I'm just kind of, all the superhero outings that I did see this year were just very pedestrian anyways, like Thor, Guns N' Roses, and
I will say
Black Adam was so bad that it made Thor, Guns N' Roses look amazing.
I have not seen it, which is weird for me because that's a character that's in my wheelhouse as far as that's actually a character I and his universe, the
in our 20s. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Real quick. In our 20s, I don't know if you recall this. There's a couple of stalled projects with your twin brother too. I think more with him, where we tried to write something and never finished it.
Yeah.
But one specifically that I had with you,
I know.
we really wanted to do a Shazam Black Adam movie back in the 90s or early aughts.
That's right.
90s, it had to have been because I moved to New York by then.
That's right. And I remember being very adamant that it was Bruce Campbell, who at that age was probably still young enough to play him, but he had the look. I don't know if he had the physicality, but I think,
he could have had it.
Absolutely. And again, I think he could have.
And back then, the physicality of superheroes really came a lot from the rubber, it wasn't
exactly.
It wasn't like Michael Keaton was jacked.
Exactly. And again, I think performance-wise, and it would have been much more of a tongue-in-cheek. The source material of that comic was very fun. Wasn't taken too serious, and the artwork by C.C. Beck is still my favorite cartooning in the history of cartooning. But yeah, it was going to be very fun. In fact, at one point, I thought it should be a musical or have at least musical segments. But his best friend's a talking tiger detective, so it wasn't. The source material isn't, it's not The Watchmen. It doesn't take itself too seriously. But anyways, with that said, I didn't see it. But the best superhero movie, or at least the one I thought was most interesting, was the one that everybody apparently just didn't like even more than Love and Thunder, which was the Multiverse of Madness. And I think
speaking of Bruce Campbell,
exactly.
That was the one I enjoyed the most of the biggies I saw this year. It was the old Raimi feeling, it still managed that. This is one of the great things I will really hand Marvel that I don't see DC as having. And that is that they do allow the artist's voice to come through a little more than most. Like DC let Zack Snyder's voice through, and then Zack Snyder's voice has been like ringing through the series. Like even the ones that are off brand somewhat, except for Joker, maybe, which was still more Christopher Nolan. Those two voices really seem to be fighting for the DC feeling. And you don't conversely feel like the Marvel universe is like going the Jon Favreau route, like they really, James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy even seemed more James Gunn than James Gunn's Suicide Squad to me. So
see, I don't know if I agree with that. Actually, I think,
and that's a movie I enjoyed, but did not love.
See, I genuinely think that more than anything that he's directed for kind of like in a higher scenario, I think first off, as much as I think the Guardians of the Galaxy are definitely a product of his vision tends to be a little even more crass than the Marvel fanfare. And I think with the Suicide Squad and the hard R rating and I think that definitely was in his wheelhouse. I actually really do love his Suicide Squad. In fact, I just rewatched the Peacemaker series, which is, was his baby as well. Made me excited for what he can bring to the DC. Because I don't know if you heard, I'm sure you did, that he's been made the creative, which is what they've needed since the beginning. I like how this is turning into a Uh, we'll get on track at some point, but this is an interesting point I don't want to lose. But they've needed a creative vision. That's why Marvel's been so successful, because they had one figurehead who had a clear vision, a good leader. I mean, that's what any great organization, endeavor, whatever, needs: a strong leader with a very strong vision and ability to communicate that vision and trust other people.
And Kevin Feige, no matter what I might say about the Marvel universe, Kevin Feige is up there in probably the top 5 most important producers of all time.
I couldn't even. There's no. I think if anybody tries to argue that, they're a buffoon, because the results speak for themselves. Everything they've been able to do with the whole concept of which this will allow me to bring back my point, which is good for the listener, I hope. But he's allowed other directors to come in, add their flavor to the product, to realize that different corners of the universe kind of need their own voices so that they stand out on their own, but still have a cohesive collective vision with one arc, which I think Phase 4 is sort of, there isn't as much of a through line as what I think fans expected, with the whole like Infinity Gauntlet saga being very much in everybody's thought from the get-go and sort of being the through line. Here the through line is more conceptual rather than like a very linear storytelling capacity. But I mean, the whole concept of a shared universe is Marvel invented it in the cinema aspect and really has done amazing things now with television and film and everything. But with that said, as much as I love the fact that, again, they allow different directors, and there's a rumor, I only heard it on one site, so that to this point of allowing different directors to sort of come in and do their own thing, that Eggers might be taking over the Thor films, which
really?
I mean, could be incredible.
Could be great, but it worries me because every one of these directors, as you said, gets kind of their own unique vision into these things, but it's a push and a pull. And Marvel gets their voice in too. Otherwise, it doesn't end up with that cohesiveness that you spoke of. And Marvel is the mightier voice as well. And so it does. I'm not going to throw any kind of shade of like selling out. It is not selling out to make a big budget, mainstream, successful movie. I'm just concerned that Eggers, his personal style, for those who don't know, he did The Witch and The Lighthouse and The Northman. His particular style is so specific to a certain kind of independence that I would be a little worried that because Taika Waititi had a unique voice too, and he couldn't pull off 2 Thors. So we'll see. And I actually think Eggers is a better filmmaker than Waititi. So we'll see what happens. It'll either rock or it'll.
Well, I think the main thing I'd be excited about, one, is because we haven't seen Eggers do The Northman was his more commercial of his 2 previous films, and it's still definitely not a commercial film, but it, beautifully, like a vision of a film and a very beautifully composed and shot film. But I would like to see what he could do in a more restrained, and I don't know if you knew the whole story. Like, the Northman cost a lot of money and didn't make a lot of money, and I guess he didn't enjoy the process. And the thing that I found surprising when I heard the news was that he said he was going to go back to making more smaller budget films because the bigger budget films were just so stressful and just not as rewarding. But so that's why working for Marvel is, but again, being more of a work for hire. But I think my main thing why I was most excited about it is because it would be another hard tonal shift, which is in fact what Chris Hemsworth said that he wanted. If they do another Thor film, he would want it to be another reinvention, be just like Ragnarok was a reinvention from the 2 previous films, which is, it's still The Dark World's one of the most boring superhero movies I've ever seen. And I love the character Thor. But that's why I think Eggers could be another hard left turn to see what else they could do. Maybe bring it even more in an epic, dark, because we've had the fun, silly. But anyways, don't want to get too much off the tracks. But my original point was just like, well, I'm a comic book nerd, we've discussed this thing. Like, I have been thinking about something or dreaming about something like the Marvel Universe for years. But even at this point, it's starting to feel like homework, where I'm like having to watch. Yeah. I've enjoyed the TV shows for the most part. I didn't even finish Moon Knight yet, which is insane. But I'm watching it almost because I know if I don't watch it, how am I going to know what happens? Like, in a blah blah blah. And I will even say, I'll go on record and saying, like, Wakanda Forever, not as great as I was hoping. I love the the post-credit scene, and I actually got emotional in the post-credit scene. But as a film itself, it just lacked focus, and that's what I'm starting to get. It's like, what else can you do with these characters? And are we beating a dead horse? And we trying to... Anyways, that's a whole other episode. We could do a whole episode about this topic. So my point was originally to say, to get us back on point, is that, like, you know, we like to celebrate, not that Scrooged or Bad Santa are movies that have been unheralded. They both have big fan bases and stuff. But let's, you know, let's talk about two holiday movies that we actually enjoy that, you know,
right.
Yeah.
Well, let's make this just a moderate shift over so that we can get into the Scrooged and Bad Santa, because I do want to bring up that Christmas films are really in a renaissance right now, and it's not necessarily the kind of films that we're about to talk about, although it's not necessarily not this kind of movie. In fact, there's another remake of Christmas Carol out this year called Spirited with Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds, which I've now seen twice because we went and saw the sneak preview of it last year. We were part of a test audience, so we got to see a longer version. And it was my stepdaughter's first test screening. So, of course, she was all excited. She was in on something before any of her friends were. And it was, you know, thankfully it was a big movie. You know, it was, you know,
Will Ferrell and Ryan Gosling.
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
And
sorry.
And so she was like, her and I have been quoting the movie back and forth to each other all year because we're the only ones in on this in joke, you know? And so we watched it to see what was cut, and it still held up the second time around. They cut a few things. And in fact, maybe I walked out of the room when it was said, but I'm pretty sure there was even a reference to the Bill Murray Scrooged in the version I saw last year and not in the version I saw this year.
Crazy.
I know for a fact it was there last year. I may have walked out of the room when it happened this time. But it's also like the Hallmark movies. My wife is in there watching a Hallmark movie while we're recording. And this is something, I mean, she has the DVR set. She goes through it every couple of days to make sure she's not missing something. She's seen enough of them at this point. She's recording stuff and she'll put it on and she'll be like, oh crap, I already saw this one. So Christmas is a very booming business. And on top of that, you know, outside of the Hallmark and Lifetime movies and the Mahogany movies and all these cable channels, you know, there's the Christmas Story Christmas, which is the sequel to Bob Clark's Christmas Story. And there's Violent Night coming up, which is the big, you know, action, violent Christmas story that to counteract all of this. But it's still going after the same, and $1 million says moments of it are sentimental. So, you know, it's worth pointing out that we've picked what I would I don't know if I would call this the name of the subgenre, but I'll probably call the episode Bah Humbug Christmas Double Feature, or just Bah Humbug Double Feature.
There you go.
They're not both Christmas Carol movies, but they're both kind of in that spirit of somebody who just has an entire naughty list to themselves of problems that they need to get fixed before the end of the holiday. And there's always that story arc, and it can become very tiresome very fast. I'm not a huge fan of the Hallmark. In fact, I'm not a fan at all of the Hallmark movies, but I respect them for what they are. I feel like for the longest time, I felt like I can't knock these and then turn around and love every single 80s slasher, because it's essentially the same thing, you know, formulaic crowd pleasers repeated again and again and again to turn a profit. With the occasional one that comes out that seems to actually have its heart in the right place. But I also find it funny, I've now seen 2 Hallmark movies with Bruce Campbell in the lead.
Yep.
So, and I saw one recently with Michael Ironside. So some of our cult actors are moving on over there because it's a good way for working actors to make a paycheck.
Yep.
Which was the same with the slashers. So I'm all in favor of it because it does keep working people working. But it is incredibly difficult to keep that level of sentimentality going and still somehow keep the story fresh. And these 2 movies that we picked today are 2 movies that I think, you know, do skirt the line of cliches, because you kind of have to. Cliches are like traditions, and what's more traditional than American Christmas, you know?
Yep.
But they did kind of have a fresh spin on things. And I guess let's go linear and maybe start with Scrooged.
Perfect. Yeah, I was going to say, and yes, I mean, everything you said, I feel is dead on. And I think one thing that I feel like they had in common was they were both kind of transgressive at the time. I think Bad Santa came out and had a much bigger had a big impact because it was so wearing on its sleeve that it was a sort of anti-Christmas but an anti-Christmas movie that still is very, at the end of the day, very much in the heart of Christmas, just a much more crass version of it. Where Scrooge, I think, was, by 88, Bill Murray, he wasn't, he's well past his SNL, superstar. I mean, his career wasn't, what did he do? Mad Dog and Glory in that same.
That was a couple years later. This was actually, ironically, right after his biggest success, but also at the same time after his biggest failure. He had taken a break from acting because he was personally overwhelmed by the negative critical response to The Razor's Edge, which was his attempt to do a serious dramatic role, and nobody wanted to see him in it. Yeah, regardless of the fact that he's actually quite good in it. Yeah, and then that followed by Ghostbusters, which was a film he cared about. I mean, he didn't make it for the paycheck, but it was such an enormous success and not in line with where he wanted to go with his career, because he was essentially playing Bill Murray again as Peter Venkman. But I think that 1-2 punch, and I don't think a lot of people consider how frightening a major success can be to some people with certain personalities. And so my take on it is that Murray got actually pretty scared of how big Ghostbusters got, and the idea that now they're never going to let me do something serious. And so he actually took several years off from acting and had to be talked back into this one, and in fact said no multiple times until he was able to have at it with the script himself. The original script was by Mitch Glazer and Michael O'Donoghue, who don't know, those are big names in the early writing days of SNL.
Yep.
O'Donoghue is considered to be one of the most brilliant assholes on the planet.
Yep.
Apparently, this was no exception. He did not particularly like how this movie turned out. But Murray himself worked on on some of the script, uncredited, and there's rumors he even got Elaine May, Mike Nichols' old comedy partner, to come out and help him work on this script. And supposedly their big contribution to the script was the relationship with Claire in the movie, which we'll get to here in a minute. But I think, honestly, the heart and soul of this movie is the relationship with Claire. I mean, everything has to do with this guy's character growth, or even just us being able to witness this character in real time on a screen. Claire holds the key to the most interesting parts of Frank Cross, the character that Bill Murray plays.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's really her, and then glimpses of with his brother, where you get to see his humanity, because the beginning of the movie, he is completely lost any sense of humanity, empathy, goodwill, whatever. Yeah, he's basically the antithesis of the Christmas spirit at the beginning of the movie. A very unlikable character, and he's supposed to be, which I think is brilliant. I think one thing I loved about the 80s was that it was a time when you could have a main character who was supposed to be unlikable, and that you kind of go on that journey with and sort of watch them redeem themselves. That's not a thing you see in a lot of films these days, at least not in big budget movies, or outside of maybe small independent films. Lead characters are supposed to always be likable, even if they're lovable, even if it's a Seth Rogen type character who's kind of a dumb, kind of a dipshit. They're at least supposed to be lovable, and there's nothing lovable about fucking. But again, it's the Screw. It's basically a retelling of Christmas Carol, and he's a Scrooge-like figure, obviously, with a title.
But I find it interesting because the most direct kind of correlation that I can draw, and I've already mentioned this, but the Ryan Reynolds character in Spirited. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
No, I haven't.
He is also an asshole because he is the Scrooge character in this story. He's being visited by the three ghosts, and he's fittingly an asshole. He does things that make you want to yell at the screen, why are you doing this, or things that are just read as obviously greedy, but they read as charmingly greedy. They read as, there's no mistaking that Frank Cross is a huge asshole. You would not want to hang out with this guy. The Ryan Reynolds character, you'd probably want to hang out with him on the weekend and let him, foot the bill for the bar tab or something, but because he's loaded. But yeah, I can see people wanting to hang out with Ryan Reynolds' character. There's an appeal to his personality that, like, maybe you might sit in judgment of him on some level, but ultimately you're like, oh, but he's a charming guy and he doesn't.
Yeah, and there's a difference between characters who you're like misguided or sort of lost their way, and then there are characters like Frank, who's a fucking like he is intentionally cruel to people. He is completely
enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. Seems like a sadist, which I will say is the strength of. And now that we get to know, as Bill Murray's age, we get to see a little more. We've heard more stories of Bill Murray, the real guy, and I think the real Bill Murray makes us kind of understand, like, he manages to be a giant asshole, but also be kind of lovable, and that those are the characters he's always been. Peter Venkman's an asshole, like he's a straight up asshole, but he's a lovable asshole. But this character is like that taken to the nth degree because he's completely like he's cruel, he's abusive to everybody. It's not just about not giving poor Cratchit his Christmas bonus. It's like he's just like a straight up, I mean, almost like a sociopath at the beginning of the movie too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
but there's actually some distinct differences between the literary Scrooge and Frank Cross, the Scrooge of this story. First off, for anybody that doesn't know Scrooged at this point, Frank Cross, played by Bill Murray, is the head of a major television network that is trying to put together a major Christmas Carol adaptation to play out live on Christmas Eve. And he seems to eat people for lunch. But there is a difference between him and Scrooge because greed has many forms. Greed comes from different places and different people. And there's, on some levels, the kind of greed that comes from absolute hedonism and cruelty, which is where Frank is, because Frank does not deprive himself of anything, clearly makes millions of dollars, has the corner office, but his assistant, who is played by Alfred Woodard in the film and is clearly kind of the Bob Cratchit stand-in, she tells her family when she goes home that they couldn't afford a Christmas tree this year. And it's like, how much money does this guy make? And he's been with this secretary for clearly a number of years because they're very familiar with one another, and yet she still can't afford a Christmas tree on the salary that he pays her. And like, that is cruel. And he's firing Bobcat Goldthwait on Christmas Eve for making a creative suggestion that wasn't even out of line or out of place. It wasn't like he was the mail boy making this. He was somebody in the executive offices making this suggestion. So there was no reason to feel like it was out of line. And he even looks out the window to make sure that he catches Bobcat Goldthwait being escorted out by security on fucking Christmas Eve.
Can we just really quickly say, we'll get more into the rest of the cast and stuff and the co-stars, but God, Bobcat's so great in this role. Like, really, I mean, he's so sad, but also hysterical. And also, like, again, you have a lot of sympathy for this character. Like,
it's true. It was the first time I saw him play something outside of kind of
his stand-up character,
Zed, or One Crazy Summer, or even Hot to Trot, if anyone remembers that movie.
But you're all like you said, all of those roles you mentioned were set basically extensions of his stand-up comedy character, the Bobcat character, where he was playing just a kind of almost like a sad sack kind of character, and he did it really well. I always thought he should have had more. Like, I wish, he turned into a very interesting director, but I always thought he could have had more meaty roles or more, I think he had a lot offer and a lot of range as an actor. But he's great in it. But yes, as you were saying,
I agree. But what I was saying though is the difference between that is that greed towards excessiveness and collecting money for high score purposes rather than actually, needing it, versus Ebenezer Scrooge, who is perfectly willing to sit in his own cold ass office with Bob Cratchit doing the work. Scrooge is just cheap. He's not greedy in the excessive way. He's greedy almost like a survivor. Like he's saving up for a rainy day, but he's expecting that rainy day to be like a Category 10 hurricane.
Yeah.
Which it was a lot more common in the time in terms of the wealth disparity. Wealth disparity meant something very different in the 1840s versus the 1980s, and even more different by 2022. But But yeah, Scrooge was not an evil person. He was a miser and he was grouchy. He made himself grouchy by depriving himself of things that would make anybody happy if they could afford them, and depriving the people around him, because if he's going to do without it, everyone else is going to do without it. So there's a greed there, yes, but it's not the same greed that Frank Cross has. And in the end, when I can't really say spoiler alerts for anything Christmas Carol related.
Yeah.
When Ebenezer Scrooge is redeemed, it's from realizing, how much he's hurt people.
And also how much he is a product of his own experiences and not being able to sort of come to grips with the decisions he's made. And
But Frank Cross's pathway, while obviously very similar, being visited by three ghosts and being affected by learning new things about his past, or being reminded of things from his past, or how his actions affect others. At the end, when he's, in the burning casket and he's being cremated, what he's pleading for isn't for another chance or a redemption. He's just saying, I don't want to die. So he's just scared for his life, not scared that he wasted it. And of course, he has a great speech at the end. We'll get to that because I think it's an amazing speech that really feels like they gave him 2 or 3 posts to land on, but just ad lib everything around that.
Really, Bill Murray. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But they're 2 very different characters, Ebenezer Scrooge and Frank Cross. And I think that's part of what makes the movie work, and maybe why it didn't work for some critics back in the day, because Frank's story arc is a lot more cynical and Frank's a lot more cynical.
But again, this is 1988. So there's, we've been through 80s greed, where, it had to take it there. It had to take it there because we already know about the evils of, the industrial, huge Fortune 500 companies. And I mean, one of the greatest things about the film is it's what it says about the entertainment industry, and like the crash commercialization of everything, and really the sort of soulless for-profit entity that entertainment had become by 1988 and continues to be, obviously. So you kind of had to, you had to ramp it up. You had to ramp up the negativity and the pessimistic kind of outlook. Otherwise, it just would have felt insincere anyways. But again, the movie didn't. I remember it not being successful. That's completely in my own memory, and I remember nobody. I tried to talk about.
Okay, critics didn't love it, but it was still like number 14 at the box office for the year, which is not the worst place to be in.
Not the worst, top
a non-franchise movie, but
But
it's an expensive movie. Like Murray himself, I think, made $6 million, which was a huge. I mean, it's a huge paycheck today. But
it was a Donner film, so like Donner films were, I mean, especially by '88.
Yeah, Richard Donner directed this. I can't believe we haven't mentioned that yet. And yes, we did talk about this in our Richard Donner special, but we kind of glossed over it because we had so much to say about other things. So that's why I'm really glad to revisit this, because I love this movie.
Yeah, and I mean, I loved it as a kid. I loved it. I thought it had so much heart. So, is it Brian Doyle Murray? I always forget which. It's Brian Doyle, right?
All 3 of his acting brothers are in this movie. In this particular movie, Brian Doyle Murray plays his father. Another brother plays his brother Frank, or not his brother Frank. I can't remember his brother's name now. Frank's
Hold on,
brother though.
Yeah, wait, but
I think it's okay. Henry?
See, I guess why did I think that was Brian Doyle Murray?
Brian Doyle Murray is the one that, I mean, you know, he was in Wayne's World, Caddyshack, Christmas Vacation. He's the second most famous of the Murray brothers. Brian Doyle is. And then his brother, James Murray, I think. I've got a list here. There's so many Murrays to keep track of. John Murray, Joel Murray, and Brian Doyle Murray all appear in this movie. And Joel Murray appears only as a guest at John Murray's Christmas party. So he's the only one not playing a relative. But he was also the one. Was the one that was in the Bobcat Goldthwait movie.
Yes.
God Bless America, I think it was. And of course, One Crazy Summer, one of your favorites.
Yes, and that's the thing, because that's going to say it's Joel Murray, who I always thought. I mean, he was great. I mean, he'll still pop up in things, like he was in Mad Men and stuff. But
that's right, and he was in. What did I see him in just recently? He was a real. Shameless.
Oh, is he in
Showtime
Shameless? I've never seen it.
Shameless. Even when it's jumping the shark, it's fun to watch it jump the shark. I really enjoyed Shameless. Some fantastic acting, but he's like a real put upon. He's Joan Cusack's husband in the first season, and I always wondered if it was intentional that they picked celebrity siblings to play a.
I was gonna say, yeah, famous brothers and sisters of other celebrities. But he's so great in it. Joel Murray specifically. But I forgot Brian Doyle played his dad. That's totally like so bizarre. But Joel Murray's got so, and I again, you know, he only did small things in the 80s, like, but I just thought his character had so much heart. And you could tell how much he loved his brother. I mean, that, you know, the point of the movie is that he had people who cared about him. They could sort of see through his bullshit, that, you know, his sort of antisocial kind of cruel behavior, to remember the guy that, you know, the good dude that he used to be. But yeah, I had to point out, because again, there's so many scenes with him where you're just like, God, like he's so like Joel Murray's just so charming and likable. And it's like, you know, it's like, I wish he had.
Or you mean John Murray, who plays the brother in this?
Is it John or Joel?
John plays the brother in this, and is a brother in real life. Joel is the one that was in Mad Men and all that stuff, and he plays a very small part as a member of the party that.
They all look so much. The brothers look okay. Yes. So okay. Yes, it is John Murray. Damn it, dude.
It's a very Murray Christmas here.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Joel. That's right. That's okay. Yes. He has like a very small. What else has John done though?
This is the biggest thing I know of with John. I'm sure I didn't look up his credits. Sorry. Like I said, this was a short notice episode. So a ton of research was done. This is a lot of going off of sense memory, because I know you and I have seen both.
Oh yeah, he's very little, and weirdly, Elf and Jingle All the Way were two. Yeah, so Moving Violations. That's where I knew him from, though. Moving Violations, a movie I loved as a kid. Dude, in fact, I may need to. I actually think it's on. I remember seeing it was available like last year on Tubi or something, but. I love that movie. That's why he was so pressed in my mind. And I think I don't think I
might have a disc out for that now.
I might have to grab it.
Yeah.
I loved it. Anyways, we're way off topic. But John Murray, I thought, was so likable as the brother in it. Anyways, I brought us so far off topic. I am so sorry. As you were saying.
Well, I can't remember where I was now.
Kind of talking about the differences, though, between him and Scrooge, and
it was a really solid updating, and to be honest, nobody had really done this before. The Christmas Carol story has been told so many times. I was even thinking about this last night and wondering, like, is this one of those weird subgenres where you could actually say that there's a Christmas Carol subgenre for all the things that have been either directly adapted or in some way modified and updated?
Exactly, like inspired by, yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, I think it has so much in common with like Bad Santa, which is very specifically not a Christmas Carol. I think Christmas Carol falls under the umbrella of being a Charles Dickens adaptation, and Charles Dickens has been so adapted that he belongs in the league of like Stephen King adaptations of having his own sort of subgenre. So this is more like, that's why I threw out the concept. Maybe this is a bah humbug.
Yeah, exactly. Movies about central characters who do not have the Christmas spirit, and but who eventually, because again, it is a Christmas movie, sort of end up finding themselves that, you know, they're begrudgingly or not. But yeah,
exactly. But I had a funny thought, by the way, and this is a total like non sequitur. This was just me last night thinking about Christmas movies, but the term bah humbug, you know, every now and again, you know, like certain phrases become such a big part of pop culture, and you hear bah humbug and you immediately think Ebenezer Scrooge, you know, but he didn't invent the word humbug. And I don't know how common it was then, but we all kind of know what it means. It just generally means fuck this.
Yeah.
But what struck me as funny is I had never thought before about Bob just being almost like it's just a sound. It's not a word. Bah humbug is it's as much as saying crackers. You know,
like exactly. It's an exclamation. It's not a word. It's like a bah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or oh shucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Like so I thought that
Nuts.
exactly. Bah humbug.
Yeah.
So it's probably only a me thing, but every now and again I'll find something funny about
And that's
language
funny.
that
Those
I've
kind of
kind of
cement like
played with for my whole life and never really thought about what the like.
say
I think Scrooge is the root of it. I don't think what the root of it was when Scrooge said it.
yeah, exactly. Like the commonality of the time, because again, it's like we've lost any sort of connection with that because it's a word from 2 centuries ago. So,
And another
like,
continent.
exactly. So even I think I know the word humbug because there's a comic book connection I'm not going to get into, but so I was aware of the what that word was. But that's why I like language is so interesting because again, origins of words sometimes are very surprising, but we also the life of a word changes over time, and again, like we lose context of what a word was, and by the time we heard it, it had a life of its own. But then it changes. The context of it changes over. Yeah. So, anyways, it's a very interesting topic. I've actually had those similar kind of like aha moments, or sort of like, oh, I never thought of that about specific word usages, even recently. But we won't get too off topic. But yes, that's very interesting. A few call outs, that I want to make specifically before we get on is great cast. We're going to talk about that more in a second. But first off, I was going to do my homework. I don't know who did the makeup or, but
Yeah, I don't know the name,
but first off, there's some very scary makeups in this movie. They took the ghosts and went a little more literal with it. In fact, there's a Reaper type character, which is very creepy and bizarre, but also very funny. The way that they use the character, but like the ghost of Frank's old TV exec boss looks like a goddamn, like a Rick Baker creation. He's very terrifying, like scary ghost character, and I love it.
He walks in the room looking like he wants his Father's Day cake,
Exactly. Exactly.
And you got rats crawling out and pushing golf balls out of his head,
which is so great. And as a kid, I loved it. I loved it so much.
And I had no idea as a kid that was William Forsythe I knew him from Dynasty at the time because my mom watched Dynasty, but Forsythe was an interesting actor. I don't know if anybody out there's still a Forsythe fan. The Kitten with a Whip with Anne Margaret is fantastic. And then he is maybe my favorite bad judge of all time in And Justice for All with Al Pacino, directed by Norman Jewison. So another great actor in this. They got Robert Mitchum was in this.
I was about to say, I can't believe we've gone this far without talking about
Mitchum.
Love it.
And a guy who watches TV with his cats. So, gotta love it. And he almost didn't do the movie. Apparently, Richard Donner really wanted him and John Houseman, and it turned out to be John Houseman's last film. In fact, I don't think he actually survived to release day. But the great John Houseman, who got his start in film with Orson Welles,
one of the greatest voices in film history.
Exactly. And nobody can figure out to this day, nobody knows whether his voice is bullshit or not.
Really?
He's from some island where like you would think that he sounds English, and it's because he comes from English lineage. And don't quote me on this. I've read his book, but it's been a while. But it's like he came from an island that had been colonized by the British. And they had a different particular kind of accent that was a mix of whatever was natively spoken on that island and the British settlers. And it was this offset voice that could have passed as English or could have passed as snobby American. Or
so there's actually I'm blanking on the term, but but there
are people who say Houseman laid it on a little thick too.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Especially because those are the characters he played were all snooty, rich, so I'm sure he turned it up to 11. Yeah, real quickly, like the cast of this, Buddy Hackett,
Murray brothers, Buddy Hackett's fantastic.
Buddy Hackett, Lee Majors, Jamie Farr, again a very young Alfre Woodard who's fantastic in it, and she's so likable, and she again has to be in that sort of Cratchit role where she's like, we're empathizing with her. She's like, you know, the one that has to suffer through all of Frank's abuse and, you know, misgivings. But
she's the heart and soul of his Christmas present.
yeah, exactly.
Whereas Claire is the heart and soul of his Christmas past.
Yes. I always loved David Johansen.
Yes, I'm glad you brought him up. If we had not brought up Johansson, I think we could go an hour on talking about his performance in this.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, he's such an interesting guy. Like
he's Tom Waits meets Daffy Duck in this, and it's fucking amazing.
And he's got, if I'm mistaken, does he have elf ears in it? Like he plays like so. His character
he has elf ears, and he can blow smoke through them.
Yeah, he's like, so he plays like this. He's like the Ghost of Christmas Past, right? He's past.
Yes.
So, but he plays like a cabbie, kind of like a very cigar chomping, like old, like kind of New York cabbie, but he also has elf ears for some reason. And he's sort of like, so for those of you who are like don't know, David Johansen is an interesting person. He was he was in a very influential band in the 70s called the New York Dolls, who sort of kicked off the glam movement. That inspired everything from the hair metal stuff to the punk, David Johansen was, and the New York Dolls were pre-Sex Pistols. They were actually the same manager who basically created the Sex Pistols. The New York Dolls were his first band. They were a bunch of ugly New York guys playing like kind of pre-punk music, and they dressed like women, but they were all super weird, ugly New York guys. So, but they had, anyway, it's very influenced guy. Then in the 80s, he became his second character, which was
Buster Poindexter.
But Buster Poindexter, who's this sort of like cartoonish rockabilly.
Like Richard Cheese before there was a Richard Cheese. He was making fun of lounge acts, but as a legitimate musical act at the same time, because it wasn't quite novelty.
No, but it was like on that
serious either.
Yeah, but he was always didn't have a huge filmography, but he was actually a very good, capable actor, especially a comedic actor.
So I was character actors of that period of time. I think when I think of movies that he's in, he's often the first face I think of.
And the thing, I mean, first thing, he has a very unique look and a phenomenal voice. Like
what a fucking mug, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Just
that
a
dude's
character.
Got a kisser on him.
Yeah, and a voice to match. Again, he's like kind of like raspy, deep, thick New York accent, like
Niagara Falls.
So
it's a bone, you lucky dog.
Everything is just to the rafters. But yeah, it's great. Overall, great. I mean, Bill Murray, is Bill Murray, and he's going to outshine everybody for the most part. But this cast really does sort of give him a run for his money. And Karen Allen, who's like the antithesis to Bill Murray, she's like,
she has to be.
Exactly. But she is the she is where Alfred Woodard's character is like, we all relate to her. She's just a working mom. She's just, she's got her version of Tiny Tim that, Karen Allen.
It's easy for him to take her for granted because he only sees her at work, and it's only when Carol Kane is the Ghost of Christmas Present takes him
so
to
great
her house. Yes, and I just had to make sure I mentioned her name too in case we gloss over it. But yeah, she's the one that takes him to Alfred Woodard's house, and that's where he realizes that she has a son who hasn't spoken in a very long time, and he's wondering about the disability and finds out that it's because he witnessed his father being murdered in front of him. Yep. And he did not even know this about the woman that he works with every single day. It shows the inklings of the humanity that's being found in him as he realizes this stuff, but also like the depths to which he has been wrapped up in himself for so long. Yeah. But with Claire, with the Karen Allen character, that's somebody that he lived with, somebody that he loved, somebody that he knows holds the key to his humanity. And there's an interesting thing. There's certain points. Sorry, I'm kind of taking up a lot of the oxygen on this one. I'll let you.
Oh, no, go with it.
But you see little parts of Frank's humanity snag towards the beginning of the movie so that you can kind of get glimpses that there's something there. Like when Alfred Woodard as the secretary is going over the list of who's going to get a towel and who's going to get a VCR for Christmas. And she stops and asks about his brother. And he stops for a moment and he thinks, and then says towel. But you can tell he says it in a way that he's like, do I be a nice guy or do I be a shitheel?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's safer for me to be the shitheel because that's what he knows now. But you see like that glimpse of humanity. It's not like he just immediately says, send my brother the towel. He has to like consciously choose the towel because it's what he's used to now.
Yeah.
Because that's who he's become. But
and I'm thinking a little bit
around...
too, because he knows his relationship with his brother is strained. He knows that like he feels guilty for the dissolution of the relationship, but he's also kind of still pissed at him a little bit because he's still very self-centered. So it's a very complex moment that I'm glad you brought that up, because as soon as you started talking about it, it's like I remember the nuance of that, especially because we find out more later in the film of really why. But great example of, like you said, he's consciously making it. He's torn between being sweet to his brother, doing the right thing, but then he kind of goes like, give him the towel, like, which is the asshole move. Yeah,
it's a conscious decision and not just showing that he
just is a total piece of shit.
That he wouldn't think of it.
Yeah,
but the difference is once Claire comes back into the story, and the ghosts are what bring Claire back into the story, because the phone dials for him after John Forsythe leaves his office. And that great scene. It's also great when he gets stuck outside the window and everything.
Yeah.
But every time he's around Claire or talking to Claire, you see him become so lost. Like every thought in his head scatters whenever she's around. And it's the only time you see him vulnerable. And you can see that he wants to be vulnerable. You can see that he desires to be vulnerable and to pick up where they left off. And every time they do pick up where they left off, to an extent, in the sense that he's able to make jokes and be charming and all of this, but like he seems very comfortable with her, but he seems like a different person with her. And that's what we're moving towards seeing him become, which is why it's impactful later in the film when the Ghost of Christmas Future shows what the future holds. And he sees that Claire takes his advice to scrape them all off. And I think the line is, scrape them off, Claire. If you're going to save somebody, save yourself.
Yep.
And then she's repeating that line to her friends, who are all clearly wealthy and ignoring like a street urchin in a very Dickensian sort of cliche. Yeah. But he sees that she takes his philosophy, and that is before he pleads for his life. And that's ultimately what brings him around. Like I said before, the moment that he realizes that it's not that she's going to change him that's a threat, it's the threat that he could change her from being the compassionate person that she naturally is.
Billy is. Yep.
So without her, and this is where Bill Murray was absolutely right to turn down this script the first several times it was offered. Without her, that movie means nothing, because you wouldn't see that vulnerability that he has around her and believe for a second that this person was ever capable of love.
Yeah.
And you see his awkwardness throughout in the past scenes in their relationship. I mean, she gets him the Kama Sutra and he gets her like Ginsu knives. Like he gets her an As Seen on TV deal because he's TV obsessed.
Yeah.
And it's nice that he got her something, but you're seeing that he's never been thoughtful, but he had a chance with her. Like the Ginsu knives, as tacky as they weren't the towel versus the VCR. There was thought there that he thought that she would appreciate having the knives. And he was able to spin it into a charming joke about how he's never loved somebody enough to give them 12 extremely sharp knives.
Knives. Which again, that's one thing too, is that's a role. Say what you will about Bill Murray and whatever, such a unique talent and a unique persona that, I mean, that's why he's continued to be successful and continued to have that legacy and is so, has such a diehard fan base, was because very few actors could pull that off, where you're playing a shit heel, but the lovable shit heel, and show that you can still be a kind of a dickhead or be kind of a dipshit, but still laugh with him and still see the sense of humor and see that where his humanity lies, he shows it through his humor and stuff. And like, it's definitely that. I mean, I had no idea that the Claire character wasn't in any, like, the original version, seeing as
I
That
believe
movie
she
makes
was there. I haven't heard that she wasn't there. It wasn't the heart of it, and
how did
and I
because
don't know
even
how.
in
Like,
because even in the Christmas Carol, that's still a huge important part of like the love interest is the sort of the heart of that story. That's where he
well, I'll tell you, it doesn't surprise me that Michael O'Donoghue may have had some
oh
problems writing women.
yeah, he
Um,
wasn't. Yeah, no, that's true. You make a great point.
Again, brilliant guy, absolute shitheel.
Yeah, one
No
of the
longer
fun.
with us, but
I mean, we're not saying this. His people he worked with were said he was a fucking cantankerous dickhead, but one of the most brilliantly funny people they'd ever worked with. So, rest in peace. But I don't want to spend too much more time because our double features have been, uh, you know, we've been trying to keep them a little bit more in a timely manner.
agreed. I didn't expect we would have this much to say about Scrooged either.
But it's great. It's a great movie.
I will point out before we leave this one behind, just because I think it's worthy of mentioning, or people that do know about it will wonder if we didn't do enough research. But there is the level that Richard Donner and Bill Murray did not get along during the making of this and had very conflicting styles, where Donner apparently saw it as Murray was doing so much improvisation that it wasn't his job to direct Murray, it was his job to rein him in.
Yeah.
Whereas Murray was saying that all Donner would say is go louder, go louder, go louder, and he even made a joke about, like, I guess he must be deaf. and if you listen to the volume of Murray's voice, this is his loudest role. Like, all of the shouting, Murray has a very distinct sort of broken voice shout. It sounds like a voice cracking, it sounds like a teenager at times. It's a lot. It's in this movie a lot.
Yes.
So if that was Donner pulling him back but making him go loud, like, it's an interesting dichotomy there. But I think Donner was probably right. I think this movie could have ended up too cynical had it been left completely in the hands of Murray, especially at that stage in Murray's life. I do want to mention again that ending where he comes out from the third visit, the classic Scrooge thing where, suddenly he's filled with the Christmas spirit. But there's something about the way that Murray performs that scene. And again, it's very shouty. It's very voice cracky. But no matter how many times I see that movie, that ending sequence makes me tear up.
Same. I'm so glad I could not agree more.
And it's schmaltzy, and it's Hallmark sentimentality said in a Bill Murray voice. But yet it strikes to the heart, though, and is absolutely true, and doesn't come off as insincere.
I was about to say, I think it still has a lot of sincerity to it. I think it's because of that Murray magic where he can have this very, like, sarcastic delivery, but he's playing it with sincerity. It's that combination of sarcasm and sincerity that is very hard to pull off and make it work, but Bill Murray knows how to do it so well that he's almost making, like, there's humor to it. And he's doing it with humor. He's not just he's making jokes as he's being,
at one point
sentimental.
He yells out, "Feed me Seymour," which was a reference to a movie that came out 1 year prior that he's in. Like,
well, that's the other thing that I thought. So, like, where it's even breaking the third wall. Like, he's on the
and so that was an ad lib where he, now just the men. Okay, now the real men. Now the women. Now the real women.
Real women, yeah.
But that whole bit at the end just feels so ad-libbed with a couple of little postmarks for him to be guided to here or there. Like, he knows he has to hit this point or he's going to miss God Bless Us Everyone, But just when he starts to wail things like, I get it now, I believe it now.
Yeah.
He makes you want to believe it. He makes you want to feel what he's feeling in a very sincere, non-nostalgic kind of way, even though it's pure nostalgia.
Yeah.
It's pure Scrooge. It's pure Christmas Carol.
Just pure Christmas Carol. But again, it's the magic of it is that, again, it's really similar to something like Meatballs, where it's like, he plays this sort of, you can never take anything he's saying seriously, but when it's time to be sentimental or it's time to be emotional, he fucking nails it. And it makes
always
there's always a lot of heart. Yeah.
yeah, there's always like at least one scene in his early comedies before Wes Anderson got to him, where he's showing off. Like he's like, okay, this is the scene where I'm going to show off. You know, the scene with him and Hulka fighting in the bathroom in Stripes, or you know, there's the one you just mentioned in Meatballs. You know, he has that one sentimental scene, and this was his sentimental scene for this, because he's just wanting to make sure everyone knows that he's more than just a jokester. And
but also he understands.
We knew he could do it when he finally did get around to things like Lost in Translation. There was no doubt in our minds that this was the man who could do it, because we had 100%. Seen him. You know, Dan Aykroyd never made me want to cry. As much as I love Dan Aykroyd, as much as I love Belushi or any of his other contemporaries, Steve Martin even. I'm having a hard. Maybe there was a time somewhere down the line, but I fucking adore Steve Martin, and I can't think of any point in time in that stage of Martin's career where, you know, like nothing about The Jerk made me
I mean, like things like Roxanne or whatever, like there were later examples, or the Parenthood, which is fantastic. The comedy of Steve Martin was in his silliness, like things like The Jerk. There's a sentimentality to his character to be. He doesn't need the extremes, because the character is already so lighthearted, that where Bill Murray's whole thing is he's sarcastic. Everything he says is he's making fun of everybody. Nobody is safe from being the butt of a Bill Murray joke. To offset that, for it to not go into just cruel, mean bully territory, he has to nurture that, or balance that with a little bit of humanity and sentimentality. Otherwise, he's just a jerk. So, which again, he was just so capable of doing that role. And I think that's why he was such a great Scrooge type archetype, because he definitely could be an asshole. Like I said, like he was always the kind of a pain. I think that's actually, he was always a great pain in the ass. He was always an anti-authority figure, whether, you know, it's even in Ghostbusters where he's the hero. He's definitely kind of a fucking scamp, where, you know, he could still though be that character and bring it home so that we still loved him. So he was great as a Scrooge, where you're sort of like, and that's why I think he could take it to the place where he's just straight up a sadist at points, where he doesn't give a shit about anybody, but he's able to redeem it itself at the end, the whole time, where it doesn't feel, you know, unearned. At the end of the movie, you're like, okay, I can see how this character with this actor, you know, makes that journey. So,
well, talking of despicable people, though, I think we can move on. Would you like to set us up for 2003's Bad Santa, a movie I saw 3 times in its initial release? And at least one of those times as a theater hopping double feature with Elf that came out the same year. So great year for Christmas movies.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I mean, tonally could not be more different, but both still I considered classics, and both like still hold up.
Both very sentimental.
I mean, I didn't do any homework for this, but from my recollection, like the origins of that movie was that it was actually, the idea was a Coen Brothers idea.
Yeah, the Coen Brothers. I don't know if they actually wrote a script, but they were they
story
rewrote the one that was and they rewrote the one that uncredited rewrote the one that they were given. But I think that the genesis of the story, the origin of the Willie character and everything, was from the Coen Brothers.
Which, if you've seen the movie, it doesn't feel like a Coen Brothers movie, but once you know that, like, you can sort of see. It
doesn't feel like not a Coen Brothers, like in the sense that they have an affinity for stupid people, especially stupid men. Stupid men are like their favorite. And this is a movie just packed to the gills with stupid men.
Yeah, but that's what's funny, though, because usually in Coen Brothers films, the heroes are more saps. They're more the butt of the joke. They're more like put upon characters. They're the William H. Macy's.
But Willie is a put upon character. I was, before I lose my thought on this, I did want to point out the way that Frank Cross is based on Ebenezer Scrooge. One of the things that I think makes this so different, aside from the fact that there's no ghosts or time travel, is I really think that Willie, the Billy Bob Thornton character in this, has a lot more DNA from George Bailey, which is weird to say. George Bailey being the Jimmy Stewart character from It's a Wonderful
You're
Life.
going to have to explain that one.
Well, obviously, George Bailey is not a crass, His villain is the banker, but he's not robbing the banker. He's not breaking into vaults. But what I mean by what they have in common is that they are both self-destructive, suicidal people at Christmas time.
Okay. You did. Okay. I see where you're going with that. Okay. That's true. I think, yeah. Okay. That works. But it was just, I was like, where are you going?
They couldn't be more different. But they do share some shadows in their psyches.
Interesting. Okay, cool. I like that. Again, I mentioned Terry Zwigoff, who, what wasn't a filmmaker originally, was a musician, but he made the documentary Crumb, based off of one of my heroes, Robert Crumb, whose sadly wife, Eileen Crumb, just passed away yesterday.
Did she? I didn't hear that.
Yeah, which is very heartbreaking. Cartoon. I feel like it was like. I feel like that was almost doing her. She was much more than Robert Crumb's wife. She was an incredible cartoonist in her own right.
Oh, yeah.
Very influential, very well respected. So anyways, very sad to hear that. But Zwigoff had done that and then Ghost World. But,
Ghost World was like legendary. I hear less and less people talking about it these days, and I'm hoping it has a resurgence, but
it definitely deserves it. Which again, though, was based off of another ties, because it was a Daniel Klaus. Daniel Klaus is sort of he was the 80s version of Robert Crumb, and still is a very highly regarded cartoonist. But anyways, with this film, he sort of took on this almost work for hire role. And after watching, I couldn't think of anybody else who could do the movie as well. I'm sure other people could have, but really when you get to know his like outlook and his disposition, it's like, okay, tonally, it's hard to pull off a character who's an abusive, alcoholic, suicidal, womanizing, just piece of shit character. But it's still funny. It still has a lot of heart. And, it definitely it finds its Christmas spirit by the end of the movie.
And it has, shock value can end up so cheap. And I'm not going to say that this movie doesn't have cheap laughs. I mean, God.
No. It has
Tony Cox playing an elf, the cheap laughs are part of what this movie is about. But yeah, I've kind of lost my train of thought now that I'm thinking of Tony Cox, because
he is hysterical.
What a fucking ball of fire in this movie.
Yeah. But first of all, so why are we talking about? Because I have to say, this is one of my favorite ensemble casts. In dude, I mean, Billy Bob is phenomenal, and that's the thing is, say people, Billy Bob's an interesting character, but he is so fucking great in this role. He's so funny, but he's also so real. He's not. It's a cartoonish movie, but there's so much reality to Billy Bob's. He truly feels like an angry, bitter, pseudo-suicidal, just bitter old, safecracker. That's what he is. They're thieves. They're
This is a very different safecracker from the one we talked about last episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also a good one.
But
just
first off, we Billy Bob. It's got Lauren Graham, who I think is I just love her. I think she's adorable. I never watched Gilmore Girls outside of a few episodes, but I just always thought she was such a great talent. It's got the incredible Bernie Mac, rest in peace, which he's great in this. And then the kid who plays Thurman Merman, that's the greatest character name I can literally,
Brett Kelly is the kid's name.
Brett Kelly. Yeah. And I never wanted to see him in anything else, because to me, he was so real as that character. I didn't want to have it be ruined that he was an actor. But most sadly, an incredible performance by one of my favorite people that ever existed, the legendary John Ritter, who steals every scene he's in this. And, he's just, again, and then we're talking Billy Bob, you got Bernie Mac, Tony Cox, every time John Ritter's in this, he steals the show. And I don't know if it was his last movie role.
It was it wasn't the last thing he filmed, because he died on the set of his TV show.
Yeah, but it was last film role. Yeah,
it was his last film role, and the film is dedicated to him.
And God, I miss him every day.
And it was interesting. I was just watching part of the movie earlier today, and my wife was sitting by me, and John Ritter, it was a John Ritter and Bernie Mac scene, and we were talking about John Ritter because we couldn't remember how he passed. We knew it was sudden, but we couldn't remember the exact cause. And then it dawned on me, wow, both of the people in this scene are no longer with us.
With us, yep.
It still feels, I mean, I guess that just shows my age because it feels so new, but it's next year's its 20th
anniversary. Yeah. Same. Even when I was talking about, I'm like, about 2008, 2009, and like, nope, 2003.
But yeah, those two performers are no longer with us, and they're really performing at the top of their game in this in terms of there's stuff where they were the leads where they were better, but
yet they were both phenomenal. I mean, literally both their characters.
They're not. Yeah, neither one of them is dialing it in on this.
No, I mean that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's such an over the top movie with so many over the top roles, but yet it all. I mean, if you haven't seen it, which is weird, if you haven't, to me, I feel like this is a movie that like everybody's seen. It made such a splash because it was just so. It's a raunchy Christmas comedy, which still isn't that. I mean, people still. Well, I remember. I mean, there were horror movies that featured an evil Santa Claus that it literally caused controversy. So there's still this like sort of untouchable quality to the Santa mythology, to Christmas time. So
there's some Christmas horror movies that are more reverential towards the holiday.
Absolutely, yeah. But basically, if you haven't seen it, Billy Bob Thornton plays this character named Willie, who is a drunk, miserable dude that basically wants to kill himself, but he's got his partner played by Tony Cox, who is a little person, which is why Devin mentioned that he's a little person that plays an elf. But their whole gimmick is every year Billy Bob plays a store Santa and Tony Cox plays his store elf. Like that's their whole gimmick, and so
he's using their stereotyping to exploit them to rob them blind.
And again, nobody expects to, everybody trusts the mall Santa to be, mall Santa, and they use that as cover to get into high-end malls and rob them on Christmas Eve. So, and that's basically what ends up happening. They go to this town, and it ends up the Willie character ends up living in this house with this little fat boy, this gross little fat boy who's being picked on by everybody, curly-haired kid who barely speaks in it and seems like he might also be on the spectrum.
His face may as well be a target.
Yeah, exactly. Just a big target for bullies' fists.
And then snot.
Exactly, just covered in snot. Exactly. I'll save the ending for a second, but he meets this bartender played by Lauren Graham, who is a Santa fetish. And just a cast of just
and it's no more like, I mean, it's pretty flat out. Like she falls for him because she has a Santa fetish.
Exactly. Yeah. He goes to the bar dressed as Santa. She's kind of turned on by him, and they start this little like fling. But but despite that, like she's a good person. She's like kind of a good influence in his life. And when he's at rock bottom, when he's just ready to fucking cash his chips in, he sort of has this surrogate family. And he works at this mall. John Ritter plays the manager of the mall, and Bernie Mac plays the security.
He's the manager of the department store. It does take place in the mall, but they're robbing the department store. And
that's right.
And he's the boss of the department store.
And then Bernie Mac plays the head of security, right?
The head of security, yes. Yeah, okay. And they're like the perfect yin and yang.
Yes.
Bernie Mac and John Ritter. John Ritter is so nervous and not naturally PC, but trying very desperately to be PC.
Well, he's very uptight. He wants everything. He's very much a by the books, manager. He just wants, and Bernie Mac was like,
Bernie Mac is just crass and will say what's on his mind, even if it's gross. I mean,
and very un-PC.
And when Bernie Mac catches a kid shoplifting, it's not just that he takes the video games back, he takes the kid's MP3 player too. So like he delivers some vigilante justice to this child by come on, my grandma gave that to me, I don't give a damn.
Shit, exactly. He again, if you like Bernie Mac,
says, can I have my, and then stops because he realizes there's no reason to even ask. Like
it's so that's actually, I love that scene specifically. And he's like, Billy Bob's character loves women with big fat asses, and like there's always weird nuance.
Spencer plays one of his previous exploits in the movie.
So yeah, I love one of my favorite things is like when we introduce the Willie character. He's on the beach and like you think he's like a bartender on the beach, but really he's an alcoholic that's climbed over the bar to make himself a drink. And it's just it's so like they really let you.
I noticed that scene is not in the director's cut.
Really?
And the end shot is different in the director's cut too. It made me wonder if that's what I watched this time around.
Mm-hmm.
I had seen obviously the theatrical cut multiple times, and I had seen the uncut, the Batter Santa or whatever, which was extended. This is one of those rare instances where the director's cut is actually 2 minutes shorter than the theatrical cut.
Interesting.
So I didn't mean to derail you, but I wanted to mention that because that's kind of a rare thing where the director's cut is shorter.
It's shorter, yeah.
And he's changed elements of the beginning and the end. Same principle in both of them, but you don't see him.
I'm sure there was some like odd test scores that probably played a factor in that.
Yeah.
But they went back and maybe added a few scenes. But with that, like I said, there's not as much to unpack story-wise. It's very much, he's an asshole who sort of finds some redemption in the end with his surrogate family, and things go like the store robbery kind of go awry because at the very end Billy Bob sort of changes his mind, has this second has a change of heart, second thoughts. But it's so there. First off, there are so many fucking quotable lines from this movie that like and they're crass, like
so
very
many quotable lines that you can't quote.
Exactly in Play Company. I ain't your fucking dad. Anyways, there's things I say from this that lines from this movie I quote, like not doesn't even have to be Christmas time. Just I will quote them just as occasion needs. But it's one of those films that like it shouldn't have worked, or it shouldn't have been successful, but because it was so well done, and because even though it's again the most anti-Christmas movie, by the end, it definitely finds its heart. I mean, it finds its heart with the end of a fat kid in a t-shirt that says "Shit happens when you party naked," giving the bird to his bullies. Like that's the sentimental, emotional ending of the. Like it just works. It just
that was the part that was different though in the director's cut. Same principle there. Spoiler alert for the director's cut. But there's still a letter being read as narration by Willie, communicating with the kid, and you got the kid walking through the house, and you can see that Lauren Graham is there, so that he's not just being taken care of by Cloris Leachman, who's also awesome in this for what little she does intentionally.
Exactly.
But the scene before, he goes out to ride his bike and he's wearing that shirt, and the bullies are trying to pick on him, and he rides away and flips them off. The bullies are not in the director's cut ending. And what it is instead is that Thurman Merman, he still gets the shirt for Christmas. The shirt still says the shit happens when you party naked. But instead of riding off on his bike and flipping off his bullies, he gets down and starts washing the blood off of the front step that was left by Willie when he was shot. You think Willie's going to die for a second. And in most movies, he would have. In most worlds, he would have.
In reality.
I've wondered at times if that was the original intention for the ending, because you don't see Billy Bob again. You get him in voiceover.
Yeah.
And I think maybe they went back and shot that ending where he flips everybody off because it was going to be a more upbeat ending. Whereas the original ending may have been Willie's death on the doorstep, trying to deliver that goddamn pink elephant.
Yeah.
And pointing out, I got blood on yours. It's okay because you got blood on mine. The kid carves a fucking, what was it, wooden pickle?
Yep. And he cuts his thumb. And it's very, in a very, like, just like, his, like, crying is so, like, unnerving. And, like, it's very.
Well, he doesn't know how to cry correct. Like, he doesn't do anything like a normal person. And I think we would, in the modern parlance, try to place him on the spectrum. I don't know how much of that was the intention. But you're certainly supposed to warm up to the kid, but not after you aren't already making jokes at the kid's expense.
Yeah.
But I wonder if the ending was originally supposed to be the kid washing the blood off with Willie gone, and there's a certain poignancy to that as a visual that is lost if Willie's not gone. So that's kind of my hypothesis as to what happened. But it is still interesting to see it in the context with Willie's voiceover and knowing that Willie's not gone. There's still like an oddness to him going out and washing the blood off. But
I mean, honestly, without knowing that it was even an ending that exists, that's the only thing I can even think of a way to explain it. Like, I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's crazy. That's literally the only thing I could infer is that he was probably supposed to die. I don't know. Yeah, interesting. That's very, very interesting.
And another fun fact about this movie, by the way, in the Czech Republic, the title for this film was Santa is a Pervert. I like the simplicity of it.
I mean, it's not inaccurate. He is kind of a pervert. He likes to fuck big women in their butts. So
that was actually Lauren Graham, by the way. It was inferred because he was in the big and tall section doing it in one of the dressing rooms. John Ritter thought he was with someone
big and tall lady.
I mean, that's yeah.
Well, it is implied because remember when he's at the I can't believe we're talking about this, but he's at the mall food court, and he the lady with the rather she was thick in the parlance of our time. She's a lady with the big butt. As she's walking in the sweatpants, he is sort of very creepily leering at her. So he does like big fat dumpers. Who doesn't? It's
I don't think it's a choice on his end. I mean, not that it would be a problem if it was, but I think he has a sex addiction like he has to anything else.
Yes, exactly.
So it's not that he has a preference; it's that it literally doesn't matter to him. But just a fun fact that I learned was that was Lauren Graham. That was her leg.
I always wondered because, it felt like he would have been like cheating on her, but even though they didn't.
I mean, it wouldn't be out of his character to be cheating.
Exactly.
On her
that's what I'm saying. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But I think it's interesting that he wasn't, since she does kind of become part of his redemption.
Exactly. But like I said, he doesn't have anybody. He doesn't have anything in his life, and he finds this weird surrogate family of weirdos, or whatever. But yeah, there's so much. There's a lot of sentimentality in this movie that you wouldn't expect it from. But at the same time, like I said, it's very bawdy, very vulgar, but legitimately very well done, well crafted, and very, very funny.
Some of the shots are actually beautifully crafted, especially the opening is gorgeous. And some of the shots of him walking around in the mall parking lot are iconic. Same mall parking lot, by the way, Del Amo Mall, where Jackie Brown was shot, where Robert De Niro kills Bridget Fonda and Jackie Brown. But that was the same mall. It was doubling for Arizona, but it was actually out here in SoCal.
I was actually looking up because because I haven't heard of Terry Zwigoff doing anything in forever.
I think he had one TV show that he worked on. I don't know to what extent, but I don't think he's directed since Art School Confidential.
Yeah,
so he directed a feature, that is.
Exactly, and really, so like the only thing he's done is Budding Prospects, which was an Amazon pilot, and that's all as far as it got. So, because he did Louie Bluey, which was this documentary of jazz. That's how he knew Robert Crumb, was that they were both jazz musicians, and he made this documentary about this old time jazz guy. Yeah, and unfortunately, Art School Confidential is not a good movie. I said he didn't make a bad movie, but that's that. I mean,
I haven't seen it, to be honest. I don't even know what it's about.
It's exactly. It's about a kid who goes to art school and the misadventures. It's very loosely based off of a Daniel Crumb's short story, but which only incidentally is like the movie. It basically used a few gags from it in it, but it's not great. It's not terrible, but it's especially right after Ghost World and then Bad Santa and Crumb, which is one of the greatest documentaries ever made. Yeah, it's just sort of, it feels a little flat. I think there was a lot of trouble with the script. He didn't write it, so
well, artists need to be allowed to fall on their face too. Especially
I agree.
Artists like Zwigoff, who takes as many chances as he has, because it's not like Crumb was a reliable subject matter for a feature-length documentary, especially in that period of time. You're like, now it's commonplace to make documentaries, but at that time in was it late 90s or early 2000s?
Mid 2000 or mid 90s, 1995.
Okay, wow, 95, so even earlier than I thought. So it was practically box office poison to make a documentary at that time, and they certainly weren't going to get Crumb on PBS. So, and obviously all sorts of risks to Bad Santa and Ghost World was a female centric based on a comic book before that was a good thing.
No, exactly. It's still not the kind of story that gets comic book that gets adapted.
Exactly.
Although now it might have made into a Netflix film or something, but at the time it was like, what is this? What is this about? And like these two, and anyways, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like even if he never makes anything again, the bulk of, I mean, like I said, even Louis Bluey is fantastic.
That's the one I haven't seen. I need to see that.
Yeah, you could find it online for a long time. I haven't looked in forever, but I don't think it's ever had. It might have had a DVD release at some point, but I mean, I would have to look it up to be sure. With that said, like I said, nothing about Bad Santa you think would, if you were to describe Bad Santa, nothing about that you would think would make into a good movie, like maybe a funny, but it's genuinely a really great movie that's very rewatchable. Again, very un-PC, but it's that is built into its DNA. It's saying like, this is un-PC. This is not we're not saying anything about this character and what he says or does is good, but they still are able to find the humor. You're still able to laugh at it. It's one of my favorite Christmas movies just because it's such a palate cleanser. I mean, and again, I love sentimentality, and I love maybe not the Hallmark, but
not Hallmark, but I'll tell. Like I just on Black Friday, I picked up "It's a Wonderful Life" on 4K, and I've owned it on Blu-ray and DVD twice and VHS.
It was one of my dad's favorite movies,
of course, and one of my dad's favorites as well. And it's a perennial now, although it started off as a flop.
Yep.
Yeah, I have no problem with. I love sentimentality. I love nostalgia. Same. Nostalgia is kind of like in my DNA, and it's a four-letter word to some movie producers. Nobody wants. A lot of people are like, it's just nostalgic bullshit. And I'm like, no, like yes, it's nostalgic, but you're mistaken that it's bullshit.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's an angle in Christmas movies, and it kind of has to be there, or else the whole thing kind of falls apart. There's rare exceptions. My guess is that Violent Night gets sentimental at some point. My favorite Christmas movie of all time is Christmas Evil, which we talked about last year.
Yeah.
And that movie has sentimentality coursing through its open veins.
Yeah. I mean, literally, it's the character loves Christmas so much it's causing him problems. That's the thing is I've said this in the past, but two of my favorite, I will say just two of my favorite things ever is Bad Santa and M&R's Jug Band Christmas. Like you couldn't be more opposite as far as tones and I think that's what's so great about Christmas time is that Christmas is that one time a year where you can sort of put aside your jaded sort of and a lot of people still love to shit on Christmas and the commerciality of Christmas and all that, but I think I feel that's a little unearned, and I feel like it's a quick, cheap way to get street cred of I'm anti the holidays. Like get over yourself.
I think that attitude has always been on the fringe. I think even amongst intellectuals and people as cynical and sarcastic as us and some of the people we've known in our lives, there's a sentimental joy to Christmas, and I don't believe in the divine. I'm an atheist. Christmas has no value to me as a religious holiday whatsoever. And in fact, most things to do with Christmas, the less Jesus, the better in terms of like my level of enjoyment. I know that we're probably getting some people turning off the switching to the next episode after hearing me say that, just because not because they're offended that I feel that way, but because they disagree.
Yeah.
But Christmas still means something to me, and it does. It's purely nostalgic and it's purely sentimental, but it's sentimental for an ideal that I grew up believing that people could be good for this time of year, and that I don't believe in those same things anymore. I don't believe in those values existing all year round, but I still believe in those being goals that we should strive for. And I think Christmas is the time of year when we remind ourselves that we'll never hit that goal, but we're only hopeless if we stop striving for it.
100%.
We only stop trying to be better people. You don't look at your life and say, I'm a shitty person, so therefore I don't need to try to be a good person.
I agree. I think I agree with that 1,000,000%. And I think I've always considered myself a jaded optimist, where it's like, I recognize that things are pretty shitty, and it is a little silly to be an optimist because so much of reality points away from having an optimistic attitude, but I want to be an optimist, and I want to believe that there's good in the world and that there's peace on earth, goodwill to man. And I'm a sucker
Lucy
for
will eventually keep the football there.
Exactly. 1000%. You nailed it. So, and I'm not a religious person. I share your same sentiments, but what I love about this holiday is that you don't have to be. You can still appreciate that it's a time of giving. It's a time to show your loved ones and your family how much they mean to you, to be, to take stock of your life and be grateful for the good things and share that love and humanity with others, and, enjoy the gift of giving. I think my favorite thing on earth is giving somebody a present that they genuinely love, and it doesn't have to be, financial. I mean, whatever that is. I
love it too. And as I get older, I also recognize there is nothing wrong in saying that I enjoy receiving as well.
I mean,
the giving element of this time of year is key to it.
I will say, my father was, I remember being a kid, my dad never wanted us to buy him anything, and he would genuinely get upset if we got him a gift. And as a kid, I never understood it. And there's something about me now as an adult man and as a father where I kind of get it a little bit. Like, I think that, I tell my wife, and I'm like, look, I make my own money. If I want something, I'll buy it for myself. Let me do for others. And I'm genuinely 99% of the time too. I'm also a pretty self-absorbed, and I'm not shy about buying something I want a lot of times, as a room full of collectibles will attest. But that's why I kind of like in Christmas, let me do that for others and stuff. And
I'm not trying to say that
I know you are. I'm just saying.
Thanks, James. Now I feel like an asshole.
I love getting to, though, especially I will say, especially for somebody like me who, again, I buy a lot of I have a lot of varied interests, and I love to I have a collecting problem. I collect too much. And when somebody gets me something that they know I wanted and didn't already have, which is a problem, somebody worked to the time to figure out what's something that he would like but also doesn't already own or may not even know about yet, or that it's not the gift itself that it goes, this person took the time to I mean, anyways, it's but at the same time, viewers, if you're listening to this, if you want to send us Christmas gifts, email us on social media. But yeah, I think
you can email it all to me, though, because James would rather give you something.
That's right. So exactly.
Just putting it out.
Hey,
there.
now.
I said he made me feel like a jerk, I'm going to take the No, I follow what you're saying, and I agree 100%.
But with that said, as much as I love the holidays and stuff, I like anything. I like a good movie that takes the piss a little bit and sort of, kind of goes against the grain, and, can give us the same heart, but in a much, less saccharine, overly sentimental package. And I can appreciate that. So,
and shows us that it's okay to break the traditions as well. Yeah. I love a good Christmas tradition, but at the same time, over the course of my 40 plus years on this planet, I have seen so many of my Christmas traditions just disappear, either because, times change, people unfortunately leave your life one way or another. Sometimes you can't afford to do the things you used to do. Sometimes you can afford to do something even better, and you and your family do something even better. But then a couple years after that, you can no longer afford to do that. Traditions should always be remembered, but I think it's more important that traditions be remembered than be followed. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I think there should be a fluidity. There should be an allowability. It should not destroy your Christmas because nobody brought the cranberry in a can.
Yeah.
I've seen people get so bent out of shape, friends and family members alike. And I've worked retail enough times. I've seen it happen in customers countless times where we don't have something that they wanted, or we don't have something their grandkid wanted, or, something, we didn't have a record that they listened to every year at Thanksgiving dinner, or any number of things where you were standing directly in the way of them fulfilling their tradition, and they can get very mean. And that's not what traditions are there for. Traditions are there to make you feel good and to bring you together. And as soon as you realize like if you're arguing about a tradition and you're the only person arguing about it, stop.
Yeah.
and realize you're the one that's ruining the holiday, not the lack of that tradition. Be fluid, be understanding. If it's a tradition that's safe to return to, you can return to it another time. Don't let it mess up your day.
I think part of that is also why I like movies like Scrooged and Bad Santa, or like,
Turns tradition on its ear.
Well, it also recognizes that as much as we love to believe in the Christmas ideals, like the human experience is different from that. Crowds, I mean, again, it has one of the highest suicide rates is this time of year. People are stressed out, people are poor, nobody, finding parking, crowds, like it's a stressful time of year. And sometimes we need to like recognize that it's not all fucking Miracle on 34th Street. It's not all, White Christmas. Sometimes it's a shitty time of year. It's stressful, and we kind of need to laugh. It's a
wonderful life, and you want to jump off a goddamn bridge.
Yep, exactly. So, well, with that said, I still look forward to this Christmas holiday, this holiday season.
Before we leave Bad Santa, though,
yeah.
Just because I've never heard a conversation about Bad Santa that really sang the praises of this person, and I think that it's far too long overdue. Lauren Tom is Lois, Marcus's wife in the movie, who he shops for.
Oh, she's great. Yeah.
She is so fucking funny.
Yeah.
She is incredibly just over the top in this movie.
Yeah.
And
a great villain.
Yeah. And not like her in real life at all, by the way. But,
I don't know the actress. Like, I don't know her if she's from anything else. She's great in this.
She played Julie in Friends. That was like the main thing.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, she's one of those people, like if you passed her on the street, you would not think that she was Lois from Bad Santa. They have her so made up and so costumed and so like everything. And she's doing her fish lips and just being obnoxious as hell. And the perfect companion for Marcus.
Yeah.
The bitter yin to his angry yang.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I would feel bad if we went through an entire conversation about Bad Santa and didn't mention Lauren Tom. But yeah, I absolutely, I wish everybody a Merry Christmas. I hope this year is better than the last couple of years have been for people. I know things are tough, and like I was saying, a lot of people are not going to be able to carry forward with certain traditions they might be used to. And if I sounded bitter and chastising in my rant there, it's because it was a rant. But don't despair if you can't follow every tradition this year because it's too expensive, or somebody's gone, or you just can't travel this year, or any number of reasons. Just enjoy the day for what it is. Enjoy the season for what it is. And
I mean, one of the greatest messages of this time of year is just being great. And that's something that my family always like imparted, was just be grateful. Like, be grateful for the things you have. My mom and dad had a saying I still hold to heart, is like, as long as we have our health, we can have our happiness. Like, be grateful for what we have. We may not have $1 million. We may not be able to go, go skiing, for the season or whatever. My family's very lower middle class, working class family, but we always loved Christmas time because we got to spend time together. We got to really enjoy the holiday and stuff, and we were grateful for whatever we had. And I think that's ultimately just, take inventory of the things in your life that are good, that you're grateful for, that are a blessing. Tell the people in your life that you love them. If at least this time of year, before there's a Christmas comes and you never said it and you didn't get the chance. So this is becoming a very bummer of an ending.
We're getting sentimental, just like these movies. We're just not able to say it the way Bill Murray does.
Exactly. Where there's
I believe in it now.
No, I love that. It just doesn't matter. He's so great at rants and chanting. But with that said, Devin, I hope you and yours have a great Christmas. I hope our listeners have a great Christmas and holiday season. Happy Hanukkah.
There's still plenty of December left. We may be back for another Christmas show. I don't know.
Yeah. For once in this podcast's history, we are actually ahead of the curve. We're more than on time. We're actually a little early. With that said, though, watch your favorite holiday movies if you have them. If your favorite holiday movie is Love Actually, I'm not going to judge you. Like what you like, enjoy whatever puts a smile on your face. I personally still like Love Actually, despite it's now become this very hateable thing. It went
Also
from
came out the same year as Bad Santa. I think
Santa.
Love Actually, Bad Santa, and Elf. I mean, that is the gamut.
Yep. That's exactly the full. It's the full breadth of movies, of possible movies you can get.
And I saw all three of those in the theater that year, and I actually loved all of them.
Me too.
And I think I watched them appropriately. Like Love Actually once in the theater, Elf twice in the theater, Bad Santa 3 times in the theater. So I think that.
Did I see Bad Santa in the theater with you?
No, I was living in New York at the time, and I saw it twice. I saw it twice in New York, and I saw it once in San Diego with my family here.
Cool. I know I saw the Krikorian at least twice, and I know we went on opening night, but I know I saw it twice, but I don't know who with.
I saw Elf on opening day in Times Square, and sitting beside me were our friends Casey and Sonia, because that was the week that they visited.
Oh, that's right. Okay, cool.
So it's a very great memory, a great Christmas memory. Having those two crash on my couch for a week it must have been November, because that was the earliest of those Christmas movies to be released. But
well, we're gonna go off topic very quickly before we wrap this up. I watched 2 great documentaries today, 2 great music documentaries. The Dio documentary, Dreamers Never Die, which, if you know me, I don't love most things as much as I love Ryan James Dio, so that was great. But the other one was Meet Me in the Bathroom. It's a documentary about the explosion of indie bands or the Strokes and the Yeah-Yeahs in New York in the early 2000s. And it reminded me, Lily, as we started watching, reminded me of you, Devin, of going there with you basically at that time, maybe a little bit after, maybe a year after.
We were there together October of 2001. So we were a month after 9/11 was when we were there.
Okay,
together.
Yeah, so around the time, but it very much reminded me of you and that trip to New York, which is still one of my favorite memories.
Likewise.
But with that said, I think we should wrap this up, because we could go on for another 2 hours. But yeah, as always, a pleasure. I hope all of our listeners enjoyed it. If you did, like and subscribe on, where. So I'm so bad at these pitches.
Well, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're pretty much everywhere that you want to look for podcasts. So like us and subscribe us. If you liked us and subscribed us last week on Spotify, go over and like us and subscribe us this week on Apple Music or on Apple Podcasts. Because we want to drive those numbers up if we can. But, mostly we do this as a labor of love. And
yeah, because literally, we would be doing, in a perfect world, we'd just be sitting. In a perfect world, we'd be sitting across from each other having coffee, but we'd be doing this just because this is our favorite thing to do.
Exactly.
But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it, though. Like us on social media. And until next time, have a great rest of your holiday week. Holiday week? You have to cut that. Holiday week. Holiday month, whatever. Holiday season. Anyways, have a good night, guys.
Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Bah, humbug. Sorry, I didn't know I stole your thunder. I should have known. I should have known that's where you're going.
Ah, crackers.